Swing Part 2, more swing. If you recall, we talked about swing in a previous CBT nugget. And swing were the advanced Java classes that Sun provides for me to build graphical user interface applications, basically like Windows applications with buttons and pull down menus and text boxes and all sorts of stuff. Well, what we're going to do now is kind of build off of that. And what we're going to start off doing is just have a nice little quick review about JFrames as well as events. Then what we're going to do is talk about how to add menus to a frame, put on scrolling bars and scrollable components. I want to show you some other type of layout managers. Earlier, I showed you about the border layout. Remember how you could put things to the north, the south, the west, east, or center? And I want to kind of also show you on how you can do things like font manipulation using Java Swing as well. So let's go ahead and start off. What we're going to do is we're going to build an application that we're going to use in a later CBT nugget to help us do Java input and output. So as I said, we're going to lay down the foundation for an application that we're going to build off of later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Notepad and open up a new file. And I'm going to import the necessary packages. And the necessary packages that we're going to need are Java AWT. Remember, AWT stands for the Java Abstract Windowing Toolkit that contains most of the base classes for all of the swing classes. We're going to bring in the event package because that's where most of our events are going to live. And I'm going to do import javax.swing. Now, when we go into packages, we're going to explain to you more about what I'm doing here. So some of this stuff, especially, these first three lines, I want you to just take on faith. Okay? Thanks. Now what we're going to do is create a public class, and I'll just call it editor. Okay? And it is going to extend JFrame. Notice how everything we do in this series builds off of it. The movies that you're seeing are not mutually exclusive. If you recall, this allows me to do inheritance when I say extends JFrame. So editor is basically going to be a JFrame. As a matter of fact, I'm going to personalize it and I'm going to call it my editor. Something else I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in a constructor. We talked about constructors earlier. Constructors are those special methods. They always have the same name as the class that they are used in, and they are used for instantiating. They basically set the template for how this object will be. And what I'm going to do in there is, because I'm a JFrame, I'm going to set my size to, let's say, 300 by 400. And I'm going to call the show method. Something else I'm going to do is I will go ahead and set the title to my editor application. Okay, let's go ahead and throw in a main method here so we could actually call this thing and see what we're building here. So public static void main string args. And let's simply just do a new my editor. And save this as my editor. So save as my editor.java. do a control 1 and then a control 2. All right, and here we go. Now, something is definitely missing, and you probably may have recognized that it is the event handler. So let's go ahead and click the close, and you can see that we're still running. So let me go ahead and kill that, and that'll officially get rid of this. So let's go back and put in some event handling. This is where I'm going to use my anonymous inner class text, and I'll just come like right down here below the. We'll just go ahead and add that window listener. So I'm going to say add window listener, and it takes a window adapter. And remember, window adapter is an adapter class that I can go ahead and inherit, and because I'm inheriting from or extending from one class, I don't have to override several methods had I gone ahead and implemented the window listener class. And in there we have a public void window closing method. Takes a window event E. I know this syntax definitely takes a little while to get used to. Then I'll do a system.exit and I'll pass into it 0. Alright, let me compile that. And a control 2 to run it. Now when I click the X, let's see what happens. When I click the X, the black window tells me that it says press any key to continue, which means that, now remember, see, I'm running this through TextPad, which does some kind of behind the scenes magic to make this thing kind of appear through a DOS batch file. But the fact that it says press any key to continue there means it killed the JVM. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add something called a JText area. And a JText area is kind of like a large editable region. So let me come up to the top of the class and let me declare a variable or a field. So private JText area, and I'll go ahead and call it JTA notes equals a new JText area. And we specify some rows and columns. So let me specify those dimensions there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add that to my JFrame. Okay, so now I want to show you what I'm going to do with the set size here. So let me go ahead and clear up some lines here. And right after the title, I'm going to add that. In order to add it, I need to get an instance of my JFrames container, and I can do that by calling the getContentPane method. And the getContentPane method gives me access to the container, and it has a method called add. Now, let me just say what I'm doing here when I'm calling a method and calling a method. I'm cascading method calls. This is a kind of an advanced technique, and you have to realize that getContentPane reveals or returns back to me a container. So by saying getContentPane here, it's really returning a container that gives me access to this add method. And now what I can do is I can put JTA notes into there. And then I could go ahead and specify putting it into the center of the border layout manager. So border layout dot center. Let me go ahead and compile that. Looks like I forgot a semicolon, so let's go ahead and put the semicolon there. And we'll recompile again with a control 1. All right, looks like this time we got it. Then what I'm going to do is run it with a control 2. And here we have an editable field in our JFrame. Now let's take a look. Now I'm just typing in here. And notice what's happening that, let me type this so you could see what's happening. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or I should say 10, 11, 12, 13, etc. What's happening is the text is going beyond the borders there. It's going beyond the borders. And if I were to shrink this up a little bit, and I went ahead in here and I clicked in here and I just kept on typing, I'm just hitting enter, enter, enter. I'm still typing down here, but it's going beyond the borders. So what I want to do is I want to give my JFrame here the ability to scroll as needed. Something else that I want to do is I don't want to kind of be locked into the size I set. That forces a specific size. What I want to do is instead of setting a specific size, I'm going to go ahead and pack. It's a special method that we use instead of setting the size, which means it kind of automatically adjusts the dimensions of the JFrame based on all the components and their dimensions in there. So I prefer using pack versus setting size. Java gives me a really neat tool called a JScroll pane. So let me declare an instance of it. So private JScroll pane JSJP or JSP notes equals a new JScroll pane. Now check this out. This is what I pass to it. I pass whatever I want to be scrollable. In this case, it's going to be my notes. And instead of adding the JText area for notes, what I'm going to do is add my JScroll pane notes. So let me do a control 1 to compile that. All right, now let me do a control 2 and run it. And you can see I've got some cool scroll pane things happening here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a copy. And this is a pretty neat feature. It supports copy and paste, 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 paste. And you notice what's happening down here? It is scrolling. And I can actually go ahead and implement scrolling that easily. Of course, it will work with my, along the horizon as well as the vertical. So you could see that I'm scrolling, all the way down here. So in order to go ahead and implement scrolling, all I did was I used a JScroll bar and I passed into it the component that I want to scroll. So what I did was I created a JText area, and let's make this thing a little bit smaller. Let's make it maybe 10 by 10. And you can see already what pack is doing. Pack just fills it up or compresses it and manages it based on what is needed. So I'll shrink this up. And I created a JText area, And then I created a JScroll pane, and I passed into it the component, in this case the JText area that I wanted to be scrollable. And then instead of adding the JText area, I go ahead and add the scroll pane, the JScroll pane. The next thing I want to show you is how to go ahead and start customizing your applications and configuring them. Java Swing is highly configurable. And the way we learn how to configure Swing is by going into the API. So let me bring up the online API and let's see what's available to us. All right, let's go down into the Swing, javax.swing, and see what we can do, see what kind of trouble we can cause. What you're going to notice is there are an elaborate set of methods and properties and fields that we have available to us to go ahead and really customize the look and feel of our application. Like, for example, we're working with, I want to mess around with the JText area. So let me go to the JText area. Keep on scrolling here. All right, here we go. Here's the JText area. And let's see what's available to us in terms of customization. So let me bring that up, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the methods. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is look at this elaborate family history, this family tree here. A JText area, and here it's from JText component, from J component. I mean, there's got to be literally hundreds of methods and fields that we have access to. So here are the constructors for a JText area. Here you can see I went ahead and used this one. I specified the number of rows and columns. You could also go ahead and just create one with some text in it as well as, rows and columns. Okay, so let's see what we have in terms of some localized specific to the class methods. We can append some text to it. We can go ahead and get the information about the columns. We can go ahead and get information about the rows, things like that. Here's an interesting one. We could go ahead and define something. The font. I want to play with that one here in a little bit. Set the font to this thing. And we could set a tab size if there are tab characters in there and whatnot. Here are the methods that we inherit from JText component. We can go ahead and we're interested in either the gets or the sets. So like if I come down here, we could see we could set a margin. We could set some highlighter if we want. If we want to support drag and drop, we'd set drag enabled. Whether or not it's editable, set editable. I want to set the color, the background color of it. So I happen to remember that that's in J component. So let me scroll down to J component and let's take a look for set background right here. Let me go ahead and click that. Set background is going to allow me to specify a background color. Now, you have to remember, Java is a strongly typed programming language, which means we just can't go ahead and, say anything. We have to really see what this API tells us to do. If you're thinking it's as easy as saying set background, red or blue, well, you'd be kind of close. Here's the set background, and it's public void, and look at this. It takes a color. Now, when it says it takes a color, it doesn't mean you just pass any kind of text in there. No, it takes an instance of the color class. Now, here's the good news. I'm just following the links here. The good news is that the color class represents Java colors. But what's pretty cool about it is how it represents it. Here we can see that the color class is pretty high up in the family history of Java. It just reports directly to or inherits directly from object. Let's see what kind of class it is. Well, public class color, so it's not abstract or final or anything. It obviously extends object and it implements two interfaces. Okay. Let's see what we have if we keep on scrolling down here. Now look at this. This is cool. Here we could see some predefined colors, and they're static. So we have a static color black that is of type color. So we could say simply color dot blue, color dot black, color dot gray, cayenne, whatever we want to go ahead and do, we could go ahead and specify the color. So let's go ahead and try that. So let me go back in my class and I'm going to say set background and I'm going to say color dot green. Let me compile. I'll do a control 1 and then I'll run it with a control 2. Here is my J-frame. Now some of you are going, well that's interesting. Why is it white? Where's the green? Well, watch what happens when I move this. Can you see like the green just kind of hinting around? That's because, let me quit this. When we set the back color, we set the back color of the J-frame itself. But we filled the entire J-frame with a JText area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply say JTA notes because we wanted to do it using the JTA notes. So JTA notes.setBackColor. So let me go ahead and recompile and rerun it with a control 2. Now we got it. So let me bring this down here, expand this out a little bit, and now we can see that I've got my color. So you got to remember where you're setting your properties, okay? So I wanted to point that out to you. I brought up the API to show you the set font method of the JText area. And what do you pass into the set font method? Well, lo and behold, you pass a font. So let me click that and let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, so here we see the font class and it's fairly high up. It pretty much relates directly to java.lang.object. It's public class font, extends object, implements serializable. So how do we go ahead and create an instance of a font? Well, let me scroll down and let's come to the constructor. In order to create a new font, we can do one of two things. We can specify a map of several attributes about our font, or we can do it the way I like to. We could specify the font name, the style, and the size of the font. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and see what fonts I have installed on my computer. In order to do that, I'm going to go into my control panels and I'm going to go into the font. That I have Webdings installed. You know that Webdings is that wacky font that basically has all those wacky pictures. What I'm going to do now is set the font of my text area to Webdings. So in order to do that, let me come back here. So to go ahead and set the font, I'm going to say JTA notes dot set font, lowercase s, and I'm going to go ahead and just construct a new font object right in there. So new font. And I'm going to do the Webdings. We'll do it a font dot we'll make it bold. And how about a good old size of 14? All right, there we go. So I'm going to do a control 1 to compile it, and then a control 2 to run. Here we go. Let's see what happens when I start typing. Notice how I'm getting all sorts of weird webbing, kind of like weird looking shapes. Okay, that is because I'm using the webbings, and it's just basically being represented as that. I could go back. Let me go back and change it to something a little bit better. Let's say like Times New Roman. So I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to do Times New Roman. And I'm going to recompile and then do a control 2 to rerun it. And now I'll start typing, and we can definitely see I'm typing in Times New Roman at a 14 point. Okay, so that's how you go ahead and do font manipulation. Just a nice little idea of it. The next thing I want to start moving us into is in a direction of utilizing menus. Okay, here's the concept behind menus. First, we create a menu. We put menu items in that menu, and then what we do is we add that menu to a menu bar of the J-frame. So of course it'll look a little bit nicer once we start working on this together. So let me go ahead and click in here. Let's give myself a little bit of room, and I'm going to create a comment here, and I'm going to call this, we're adding the menus. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is going to create a J menu. A J menu is a class in the Java X.Swing that allows me to create menus. And that J menu, I'm going to call it menu, how about the file menu? And it's going to equal a new J menu, and it's going to be called file. Then what I'm going to do is I have to go ahead and add that menu to my J menu bar. And the J menu bar is kind of like the topmost level here of what stores the menus. So I'm going to create my J menu bar. So J menu bar, and I'll just call it, how about JB equals a new J menu bar. Nothing too exciting going on there. New J menu bar. And now what I'm going to do is I'll come down here and I'll say, now I wanted this to be a JB for J menu bar, or JMB for J menu bar. And I'll do JMB.add, and let's put M file in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the setJMenu not emu, but setJMenu bar method of my J-frame, which I am, and then what I do is I pass into it JMenu bar, okay, and I kind of build it up. So I'll compile with the control 1 and then run it with the control 2. And here you can see I've got a menu. Now, nothing too exciting because I don't have menu items in it, but I have a menu. So let's go ahead and come back into here and add some more J menus to the menu bar, and then we'll start filling it up with some J menu items. So that's file. What are the typical ones? File, J menu, how about menu, edit equals a new J menu, and we'll say edit. We'll do, how about, JMenu search equals a new JMenu. We'll call it search. Do one last one. JMenu menu. There's always the help menu, right? Help equals a new JMenu, and that will be help. And you know what? What I'm going to do for consistency is I made that a cap. I made those all caps, so let me make these all caps. Now, here's the deal. The order in which you add these to the J menu bar determines the order that they go in. So I already have M file, so let's do M edit. Let's add JMB add M search and JMB.add M help. Okay, so let me compile and then I'll run it. And here we have it. So I've got 4 menus. Now notice again that nothing is in them. We're going to go ahead and make them work here in a second. So let's go ahead and kind of review what I did. What I did was the first thing I do is I create a JMenu bar. Okay. The menu bar stores everything, and then that's what eventually gets attached to the JFrame by passing the JMenu bar that you create here into the JFrame's setJMenuBar method. Then you create a bunch of JMenu items, and you add them in order to your JMenu bar. Now what we'll do is create some JMenu items. So I like to kind of do it underneath here. So let's create the JMenu items. So I'll create one. I'll say JMenu item. And I'll call it menu item. I usually like to do it this way. It's going to go into the file menu and it will be exit. Okay, so that's it. I kind of have a path. So I'll say new JMenu item and exit. Now what I do is I add the exit to my JMenu. So M file, let me back that up, it's M underscore, oops, we're getting a little too crazy there with the backup, M underscore file dot add, and I'm going to put my menu item file exit into that. Let me compile and then I'll run. Now, if I do file, I click on it, look at that, exit. Now, I bet you wish it, actually quit the application. And of course, this is Java, extremely powerful and flexible, but we're going to have to go ahead and add our own error or event handling to this. But not a problem at all. It's the exact same thing that we've been doing all this time using Java event handling. Check this out. To get the exit button to work, we simply do the event handling that we've been using for a while. So I've got my menu item file underscore edit, and I can add an action listener to it. It takes a new action listener. Yes, this is the anonymous inner class syntax. Okay. And close the method. And what does it take? It takes a public void action performed. Takes an action event E and I'll simply go ahead and do a system.exit, and we'll pass 0 into that. Now I'll compile and run it. Now if I do File, Exit, you can see the application quits and I'm out of there. So pretty cool, huh? That's what I say about this whole course. Everything is going to build on top of everything. Swing 2, more swing. What we did in this CBT nugget is take a look at some advanced features of utilizing Java Swing. Specifically how to set some additional properties and methods of JFrames. I showed you that maybe you don't want to consider using the set size method of the JFrame and specify a hard-coded side, but you could call that pack method, which kind of utilizes the configuration of components within the JFrame to set its size. Showed you how to add menus using JMenuBar, JMenuItem, and JMenu classes. Showed you how to make a JText area scrollable by passing an instance of a JText area into the JScroll pane. Then I showed you how to use the layout manager, the border layout manager again, to set components onto a JFrame, as well as change the fonts utilizing the Java font class. I hope you found this informative, and I'd like to thank